I'm very happy to present this extraordinary novel, Francis Bacon's Nanny. Here you see the proof copy in which Bacon is barely visible. We've changed at the last minute to put Francis in the background. This is the third of a trilogy, a triptych in effect, a panel of Beckett, Yeats, and Francis Bacon. The book has already won the Prix de Roman d'écrivain 2023. And Maylis tells me this is the first English language, the first of 5 translations. So we're sold by her publisher Gaimard, and we're proud to be the first out of the trap, so to speak. The novel itself inhabits the persona of Jessie Lightfoot, Francis Bacon's nanny, with a dual voice rendering of Bacon, encircling the work of the artist. It encompasses his childhood in Ireland, his milieu, Paris, Berlin, wartime London, and Soho in particular, Monaco. Here we have the afflicted, asthmatic man-child genius, parlaying his canvases, his ordered chaos, all given life through the voice of his loving, unjudgmental nanny, Jessie Lightfoot. This is a seemingly slight but immense work, both a study and a portrait in itself, detailed, immersive, swirling, masterfully in its penetration. It is the art of biography perfected by a novelist through its style and the quality of the writing, translated meticulously by Clíona Ní Ríordáin, who translated the earlier works. It's a gift to screenwriters. I see a distinguished filmmaker in our presence, and it will also form a perfect audiobook. There are some books that lift you out of the world like a barrage balloon. This is one. Congratulations. And now it takes form of a dialogue between author and translator.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Clíona Ní Ríordáin, and I have the great good fortune to be Maylis Besserie's translator. And I'm delighted to have this conversation with Maylis tonight, because in actual fact, it was through a conversation and an interview that we came to know each other, and that I came to translate the first novel. In French, we would say la boucle est bouclée. Things have turned in the round. This is the final novel of the trilogy. As Anthony mentioned, the first novel was devoted to the last days of Samuel Beckett's life, called Le Tiers-temps. Yell, Sam, if you still can. The second to W.B. Yeats and to the meanderings of his body, Scattered Love. And so the final one is Francis Bacon's Nanny, La Nourrice de Francis Bacon. We have the title in French as a subtitle to the English. And I think this dialogue is perfect, because in a sense, what you're doing is you're making these two worlds talk to each other. The Irish world seen through these major figures, and the French world, which they also inhabited. How did the idea for Francis Bacon as the last figure in your trilogy come to you?
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for having me here tonight. I'm very happy to be there, as always. And well, to finish the trilogy, I wanted to have the enemy somewhere. So English were missing some, and so at some point I was thinking maybe I would like to do something about an artist which won't be a writer, so it would be something different. And then I thought, every time I go to Dublin, I always go to the Humour gallery, I always go to the studio, and I always go to see Jack Yeats' painting. And that's, that's the kind of ritual I have every time I go to Dublin. And one time I remember watching a documentary, which is called The Brush of Violence, on Francis Bacon. And there was this man, he's called John Richardson, I think, who's an historian of art. And he was talking about Bacon's life and in London, and he said, but every time we were going to Francis, there was Nanny. And I was like, what's this Nanny about? I mean, we're talking about a scandalous painter, the painter of flesh and violence, and there's a nanny involved. And I was just surprised by him mentioning this, this character of childhood, there was a kind of, strangeness in that. So I was starting to make some research on the nanny he spoke about. And I was surprised even by her name, Jessie Lightfoot. And I was like, Lightfoot, my God. And so I started to look at, and on the biographies and on the books on Bacon, there were a few lines about Nanny, not much, but everything was about the fact that she was quite a character, very funny, conservative at the same time, who really accepted everything from her beloved Francis. So there was a very tender relationship between this man and this old woman, and something which is the complete opposite of what we know about Bacon and what he wanted to show as an artist, the side of violence and all the part of his life. And I think she was the bright side in a way. So I thought that she would be maybe a way to tell the story. And so that was the beginning of the third book.
She has a very distinct voice. How did her voice come to you?
I had a few elements about her, but not much. I mean, no letters, no records. So it was only about what friends of Bacon said, testimonies, saying, I remember one of the friend of Bacon imitating Nanny. So I had a kind of vision of this short, small Nanny, very funny, stealing in the market if they needed more food, and at the same time passionated by the British monarchy, and so she was a kind of strange character, and the fact that Bacon was so sad when she died, that he was completely lost. She was running his life in a way, and so I had to create a powerful character. And so I was thinking maybe I should create a nanny talking. She's not a character of, I would say, de l'écrit in French. She's not someone who's very much into reading. She hasn't been in school for long. She's those kind of nanny who have been sent to work at a very young age, as a teenager, like it happened in those times in England, in Ireland, and in France, and everywhere in Europe. So she's a very smart woman, but she's not educated, but she knows life. She has an experience of life. So she has her own opinion on things, So I wanted to create a voice which would be much more like a talking voice, as if she was telling the story to the reader, making a cup of tea in the kitchen. So this kind of way of talking, very direct and simple way, but at the same time, she has a very deep idea of, she knows everything, it happens for people who are working in a fancy house. It's like in Downton Abbey, they know the word of the working class, they know the word of the masters at the same time. So she's between the two languages too, and she knows how to talk to Mr. and Mrs. Bacon. She knows how to talk to, she has all these levels in mind. And so she knows about all the class. And this was an important notion. But then I had to create a French voice for an English nanny, which was a problem, So I had to create a kind of old-fashioned way of talking, which would be full of images and would be literary in a way, because it's from another word,
So how did you because in essence, what you're talking about is orality, and dialect, and questions of register. But you managed to do that so skillfully and so artfully Can you give us an example of how you make that voice work?
I'm from the southwest of France, so I had a lot of memories of my own grandparents and people from a certain age when I was a child who had this old countryside French, which is strangely very close to some old books that I read as a child. You know, it's an old French that we don't really talk now.
Georges Sand, for instance.
La Comtesse de Ségur, and yeah, so it's full of old French. It's beautiful, and sometimes there's a kind of strange way to use the language, you know, which is almost inappropriate, which is very funny at the same time. So I like the way that sometimes she uses expression that she doesn't completely know, you know, and so and sometimes it makes things beautiful, you know. So and then I had this, I don't know, I had this voice in my head. It's always a bit scaring when they say that, but you know, it just had a clear notion of what kind of language she had, and so she has a few habits of language, that some words that she repeats quite often. So it's a bit like a monologue, talking about what was Francis, her own Francis as a child, because she is his mother in a way, you know. She's the one who took care of him in his family and in this very violent home. So she knows everything about him, even the dark side.
Because she lived in Kildare with the Bacon family.
Yeah, she arrived when he was very small. Yeah.
I think that idea of the voice in your head is really what links the three novels. They're novels of voices, which is not a surprise because you're a radio woman. You hear voices and you create voices.
Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, because it's a painter, I had to think visually about the way he educated his eye, you know, as we would say in French. You know, he had asthma, so he was not in school at a very young age. You know, he went to school later. He was at home in this beautiful landscape of County Kildare with horses around, with animals, but at the same time, because of his asthma, this place was a nightmare. And you have the beauty of the place and the violence of several violence, I have to say. I mean, his father, who was a difficult man. And you have also the context, the historical context of IRA and, you know, and what happened in the region at the time. And you have the wars, you know, because he's born just before the first World War. So you have the first one and the second one. And he was living here and in London, you know, they moved to Ireland and London many times. So he was a bit between the two countries. So there was this wealthy family and beautiful place, and at the same time this kind of unhappiness also. So I had to think also visually what he had in front of his eyes, you know, this nature, these animals, the stables guy, the relationship he had with him being whipped, and all the images that comes from this very early childhood.
And you had to make Nanny tell those things.
Yes.
Perhaps the best thing would be for us to hear Nanny's voice.
Yes, we can do that. Nanny is putting on her glasses. And we'll do a bit in the two languages, if you don't mind. That was just que je vous raconte.
Oui, c'est ça.
Ok. Je m'arrête quand je m'arrête, hein, tu me regardes. Que je vous raconte. Un jour, Mamie organise une fête. Mamie est une vraie dame. Elle organise des fêtes somptueuses avec tout un tas d'énergumènes. Des fêtes qui font jaser les voisins. Pour celle-ci, elle décide que le déguisement est de mise. Francis et moi sommes déjà chez Mamie. Je le vois qui tourne autour de la garde-robe de sa grand-mère, qui cherche de quoi se nipper. Tout à coup, il s'arrête devant une robe courte à franges, une robe dos nu de flaper brodée de sequins.
Let me tell you this. One day, Granny organized a party. Granny is a real lady. She organizes sumptuous parties with all sorts of crazies. Parties that get the neighbors talking. For this particular one, she decided that fancy dress was the order of the day. Francis and I were already at Granny's. I saw him going through his grandmother's wardrobe, looking for something to wear. Suddenly, his eye alights on a short fringed dress, a halter neck flapper dress embroidered with sequins.
Mamie la retouche pour lui, l'ajuste à sa taille fine. Le tissu est assorti au bandeau à plumes qui entoure son front et au rouge à lèvres qu'il a soigneusement appliqué devant le miroir feuilleté d'or du cabinet de toilette. Je le croise au moment où il descend. Avec sa coupe à la garçonne, je manque de ne pas le reconnaître. Je lui dis « Ah la belle blonde !» Il m'embrasse, hilar, dévale gracieusement l'escalier, ses escarpins vernis laissant à chaque pas de minuscules trous dans le tapis des marches.
Granny alters it for him, adjusting it for his slim waist. The fabric matches the feathered headband around his forehead, and the lipstick he carefully applies in front of the gold mirror in the dressing room. I pass by him as he comes downstairs. With his boyish haircut, he is almost unrecognizable. Look at that gorgeous blonde girl, I say to him. He kisses me, grinning from ear to ear, and gracefully descends the stairs, his patent pumps leaving tiny prints on the carpet with each step.
À son arrivée, il fait sensation. Tout le beau linge anglais vient le voir. Des ladies travesties en reines l'effleurent de leurs gants, s'esclaffent entre deux bouffées tirées sur leurs fumes-cigarettes. Des gentlemen, enveloppés de capes mirobolantes, s'approchent de lui comme des loups. Tous viennent admirer le jeune homme flamboyant dans sa robe du soir, le garçon qui ressemble à une fille.
When he enters, he causes quite the stir, with all the English gentry coming to see him. Ladies dressed up as queens, brushing him with their gloves, laughing between two puffs on their cigarettes. Gentlemen in shimmering capes, approaching him like wolves.
Tous viennent admirer le jeune homme flamboyant dans sa robe du soir. Pardon, le garçon qui ressemble à une fille, vas-y.
All come to admire the flamboyant young man in his evening gown, the boy who looks like a girl.
Le costume colle si bien à sa silhouette chétive. Sa présence diffuse un trouble dans la salle. On se croirait à une de ces fêtes irlandaises où les hommes portent le kilt à la régimentaire, où nus, sous leur tenue, ils affolent les femmes autant qu'ils s'affolent eux-mêmes de se savoir à portée de main. Francis est tellement jeune, 14 ans à peine. Je sais très bien ce qu'il est en train de faire. Je le connais. Il joue, pour une fois qu'on le laisse faire. Il amuse la galerie. Il imite les anses de mamie. Tant mieux au fond. Lui d'ordinaire si timide, resplendit sous ce nouveau visage, prend confiance derrière le phare.
The costume fits his slight figure so well. His presence spreads a feeling of confusion through the room. It's like being at one of those Irish parties where the men wear their regimental kilts, and knowing they're naked underneath, they scare the women as much as they scare themselves, aware that they're there for the touching. Francis is so young, barely 14. I know exactly what he's doing. I know him. He's acting. For once, he's doing what he wants. He's entertaining the crowd. He's imitating Granny's manner, which he admires so much. So much the better, really. He's usually so shy, but in this new rig out, he gains confidence beneath the makeup.
Ses gestes se libèrent. Il se hasarde même sur la piste de danse à quelques pas de Charleston. La robe fluide glisse sur ses jambes qui s'agitent, sur ses genoux qui se croisent. Je n'en reviens pas. Les invités l'applaudissent. Ils contemplent avec envie le jeune corps qui se donne en spectacle, qui profite du déguisement pour révéler ce qu'il est en vérité. Moi, je le sais depuis longtemps. Vous pensez, et alors, la belle affaire, c'est un enfant merveilleux. Je vous assure, j'en ai vu passer des drôles. Il n'y en a pas deux comme lui, pas un qui arrive au talon de ce petit. Il voit tout, il sent tout, il comprend tout sans qu'on lui explique. Je n'ai jamais vu ça. Il ne fait rien comme le monde. C'est vrai, il a toujours une idée derrière la tête, toujours une parole rusée. Il se passionne pour les belles choses. Il aime qu'on l'aime, c'est tout. C'est ça que son père ne comprend pas.
His movements are freer, and he even tries out a few steps of the Charleston on the dance floor. The flowing dress glides over his moving legs. His knees cross. I can't believe it. The guests applaud him, gazing enviously at his young body, showing itself off, taking advantage of the disguise to reveal what he really is. I've known for a long time, as you can imagine. What's the big deal? What of it? He's a wonderful child. I'm telling you, I've seen a lot of funny ones, and there are no two like him. Not one who even comes close. He sees everything. He feels everything. He understands without being told. I've never seen anyone like him. He doesn't do anything like everyone else, and that's true. He always has an idea at the back of his head and always has a clever remark to make. He's passionate about beautiful things. He just likes to be liked. That's all. And that's what his father doesn't understand.
Alors que Francis danse, je reconnais le capitaine au fond de la salle, en robe de prêtre. Appuyé contre un fauteuil, il ouvre et ferme frénétiquement les poings. Il suit chaque mouvement, chaque hochement de tête de Francis qui secoue ses boucles d'oreilles à pince. Quand l'orchestre marque une pause, je le vois qui fait signe à madame, à l'autre bout de la salle, de le suivre, lui indique la sortie d'un coup de menton.
As Francis dances, I recognize the captain at the back of the room, dressed up in priestly robes. He leans against an armchair, frantically opening and closing his fists, following every movement, every nod of Francis's head as he shakes his clip-on earrings. When the band stops, I can see the captain motioning to Mrs. Bacon at the other end of the room to follow him, indicating the exit with a jerk of his chin. I know exactly what Francis will be facing when he returns tomorrow.
Je sais très bien ce qui attend Francis à son retour demain. Qu'est-ce que je ne ferais pas pour l'empêcher si c'était en mon pouvoir? Vous voulez le savoir, vous, ce qui l'attend? Eh bien, je m'en vais vous le dire. Ça me fait mal d'en parler, mais il faut que la vérité se sache un jour ou l'autre. Le lendemain, sur les coups de 10 heures, quand Francis rejoint la maison familiale, le capitaine fait ce qu'il lui fait toujours, dès qu'il en trouve un prétexte, l'occasion de le faire payer. Il l'agrippe par le bras et l'emmène en silence. Il le conduit vers les écuries et le châtiment que le pauvre enfant connaît par cœur.
Do you want to know what's in store for him? Well, I'll tell you. It pains me to talk about it, but the truth has to come out sooner or later. The next day, at the stroke of 10, when Francis returns home, the captain does what he always does to him. As soon as he finds an excuse, an opportunity to make him pay, he grabs him by the arm and leads him away in silence. He leads him to the stables. The punishment that awaits is one the poor child knows only too well.
D'abord les odeurs, les effluves de crottin et de pisse, le parfum des chevaux qui s'agitent alors que ses narines se rétractent, que sa bouche s'ouvre sans pouvoir pousser un cri, sans parvenir à mordre ou à le défendre.
First the smells, the stench of dung and piss, the odor of horses fills the air as his nostrils contract. His mouth opens without being able to utter a cry, without being able to bite or defend himself.
Un simple filet d'air, c'est tout ce que mon Francis arrive à puiser par cette bouche. De maigres bouffées, juste ce qu'il faut pour répondre aux ordres de la voix qui gronde, du capitaine des enfers qui exige qu'il se déshabille.
A mere trickle of air is all that my Francis manages to draw through his mouth. Meager puffs, just enough to respond to the orders of the voice that rumbles, the voice of the captain of the underworld, who demands that he undress.
Le voilà à quatre pattes devant ses palefreniers de malheur, ces lâches qui se rapprochent de lui au garde-à-vous. Pas un pour refuser la basse besogne, la corvée de fouet sur le dos de mon petit qui s'affale, tête entre les jambes, dans la paille humide et froide, sous le regard enjoué de son père.
Now he's on all fours, in front of the cowardly grooms of misfortune, who approach him under orders from his father. Not one of them has refused to carry out the terrible task of lashing my little boy's back with the whip as he slumped with his head between his legs in the damp, cold straw under his father's playful gaze.
Ah, il jubile, il n'en perd pas une miette. Il profite de chaque raclée, des premiers coups qui rougissent la peau, des suivants qui la lacèrent. Il s'en met plein les yeux, le capitaine, se les rince et commente, cache sa vilainie derrière son uniforme, derrière son rôle de père. Un indigne, voilà ce qu'il est. Et qui se vante en plus, qui se vante de ses crimes, clame haut et fort qu'il a accompli son devoir. Le boucher ne se salit même pas les mains. Il laisse faire les larbins et profite du spectacle. Il insinue le poison par ses mots, dégoûte l'enfant de lui-même par la parole, le tord pour mieux se plaindre ensuite qu'il soit tordu. Il agit ainsi jusqu'à le détruire, jusqu'à ce qu'il n'existe plus, jusqu'à ce que l'enfant ne soit plus qu'une ombre, qu'il ne lui en fasse plus. Chaque fois qu'il l'emmène seul dans les écuries, je ne vis plus. Je tourne autour de la maison en psalmodiant comme une folle. J'ai peur que Dieu me lâche, que le souffle fragile s'éteigne, que la peau de l'enfant craque, qu'il se noie dans son propre sang. J'ai peur, je serre les dents et me mords la langue. Je sais que je ne dois pas m'approcher, Francis me l'a fait promettre. Je reste là à tendre l'oreille. Pas un cri ne sort de sa bouche, pas une plainte. Seul le hennissement du fouet qui s'abat sur lui, comme pour le mettre à mort.
Ah, his father is jubilant, doesn't miss an instant. He enjoys every beating, the first blows reddening the skin, the next ones lacerating it. The captain gets an eyeful, drinks it in, and comments on it. Hides his villainy behind his disguise, behind his role as a father. An unworthy man, that's what he is. And a braggart at that, flattering himself with his crimes, braying loud and clear that he's doing his duty. The butcher doesn't even get his hands dirty. He just lets his stooges do their thing and he enjoys the show. He injects poison into the child with his words, makes the child disgusted with himself, twists him so that he can complain later that he's twisted. He does this until he destroys him, until he no longer exists, until the child is no more than a shadow, until he no longer cares for himself. Every time he takes him to the stables alone, I can no longer breathe. I walk around the house chanting like a mad woman. I'm afraid that God will let me down, that the child's fragile breath will be quenched, that his skin will crack, that he will drown in his own blood. I clench my teeth and bite my tongue. I know I mustn't go any nearer. Francis has made me promise. I just stand there and listen. Not a cry comes out of his mouth. Not a complaint. Only the whinny of the whip coming down on him, as if he were being put to death.
How did you imagine that?
Because it's almost as if we're there in the room, in the stables. How did you recreate it? It's an incredible feat of the imagination.
I don't know. I mean, just if you look at Francis Bacon's painting, you can feel that violence that turned into a strange erotism that ran his life in a way. You know, it's a kind of, I would say in French, the soup of the childhood is there all the way long. You know, this complicated childhood, this complicated relation to his father, and it's everywhere in the painting. And I wanted to, I mean, it's not about writing the truth, it's not a biography, it's about writing something which would be in the word of Bacon's, you know, it's a Baconian scene in a way, told by a character who doesn't enjoy the scene, you know. This was my way to do it. I didn't want to bring darkness to the darkness. And I needed a bit of light, and the nanny was a way to find a bit of light. And she loves him. She's very sad, but she believes in him as an artist. She believes that he's pretty much able to do things in his life, and he does get away of his home, and he had a complicated, troubled, but a wonderful life, and became this great painter. So I had this idea that she brought enough energy, and that he could have something else than self-destroyed, and you know, and getting so much drawn in this violence, that he had an exit, because she saved him. Yeah, she's been there. I mean, she was a great support and showed another side of life, you know, because it's not even what she does, but it's who she is. In my point of view, he loved her so much that she had to be someone, you know, and someone with a kind of charisma and magnetism that he would be attracted in a way, like it would be full of respect for her, you know.
In a sense, she's almost like a shield that's going to repel the evil father.
Yeah, and at the same time, she has authority on him, you know. She's the boss, and and he has respect for her, and she knows when he's lying, and she knows when he's doing things wrong, and I had this idea that she was this tender old nanny in a way, and at the same time she was the boss of the mafia, you know. She had these two sides, and I like this idea that she was such a strong lady. And she's, you know, she choosing men for him. She had her opinion about the boyfriend. She had opinion about the way to make money. She had, you know.
But you have, I mean, that's your version of her.
Well, we had a few information about that, you know, friends saying, oh, when Bacon's friend came over, and she used to say, oh, do you want something to smoke? And, you know, she wasn't talking about
John Players.
It wasn't cigarettes. Yeah. So, you know, she had these funny sides. So if she had been born in another time, in another family, in another class, she would have been a kind of punk nanny, you know. So she had this side too. So it made her, of course, what we chose to read was a difficult part, but she's also full of fun. She's great fun, and he's having fun with her. And she's a funny character that all Bacon's friends like, because she's different, you know. She's as different as he is in a way.
So what we get this voice, which you use to narrate Bacon's life,
yeah,
in essence.
Because being the nanny, she's the specialist. You know, from the childhood, she knows everything.
And you divide the novel into acts, into tragedies.
Yes, yes. I think Bacon's life has been divided in tragedies. I mean, he had a very complicated life, and he lost a lot of people he loved, and I think all this time of grieving is obvious in the painting. You know, it's everywhere in the work. Of course, we do know in you know, at the end, the George Dyer's tribute and all that, but even before that, you know, there's a time with Peter Lacy, and with we have the Pope, and we have the, you know, these times it's always full of, the painting is full of his life and of the events of his life, and grieving is an important thing.
So we get her voice, we get these tragedies, but we also get Francis Bacon's voice. How
Sorry, I need to finish something about the
Okay.
tragedy. He's also a big fan of Aeschylus. I don't know how to say Aeschylus in English. Aeschylus. So he loves Greek tragedy, and we have the Furies in the painting, you know, those character, and so I think that the tragedy was also a kind of form that would suit the book because it was in the spirit of the painting than the way he worked, and it's also divided in 3 parts, the way he was working too. So this was all based on the kind of choice he made in the painting.
Because he was a very literary man. I mean, there was that wonderful exhibition in the Pompidou Center
Yeah.
on the connections between his art and literature.
Yeah, T.S. Eliot, Yeats, Shakespeare, and he was very much interesting into reading, and he kind of taught himself. He read a lot, and we're not surprised by his choice, you know, by what he likes, kind of literature he likes. And it's everywhere. And there's also the fact that he's very much inspired by classical culture. I mean, you know, crucifixion and all the religious painting is there, but turned into something which is not religious anymore, you know, as we can say, as an understatement. And it's the same for literature. I mean, he's very much interested in Greek tragedy, but what he likes, of course, is difficult and dark stories, you know.
And you have him read Greek tragedies to Nanny, don't you?
Yes. This was an idea of mine that she likes to read, but she hasn't been in school many times. I mean, she's only able to read and to write, but she was only going to school, well, like in those times, those young ladies who were sent to be a nurse or to be working
In a
as-
big house.
yeah,
as maids.
14 or 15 years old, you know, they were sent to school only short time, sometimes in the winter, because they had to work during the year, especially if they were living in the countryside. So I had this idea, which is not true, or maybe it happened, but we don't know. I don't know if you have information, Margrethe, about that, but I had this idea that he would get her read some stuff that he likes, and why not Greek tragedy? And what I liked the most and the more fun I had with her is that she doesn't know painting, she doesn't know literature, but she kind of enjoy it, you know, but she speaks about it in a very simple way. But I say that without, like, it's not simple, like it's not dumb, it's her way to see it, and it's a true way, you know, very direct relationship to,
Unvarnished,
yeah,
to use a painting term.
she's reacting to what she reads and to what she sees, and that's exactly what he wanted with the painting, you know, to make a reaction. So she has of course she has having fun because it's the time of surrealism, and so she's having a lot of fun about, you know, and this man who's doing his egg without eggs, and, you know, these silly paintings. Of course she thinks that all that is completely silly, especially because they criticize her little Francis painting, you know, because he's not one of them. So sometimes she's having this way of talking about painting, and it's the same with the reading, you know. She's getting blind slowly. She has a problem with her eyes, and so she's getting blind. And at a certain point, when he left home, he's been kicked off by his father after an argument, because his father found out that he was gay and found him in his mother's underclothes, which was a problem for the captain. So he's been sent abroad to Berlin. Then he traveled for a while. It was in France and then in London. And so they are separated for a while. And then she started to get blind. She wasn't completely blind, but she had problem with her eyes. And the girls were a bit grown up, so she left the house.
These are Francis Bacon's sisters.
Yes. So and she goes to London, and she goes to live with Francis Bacon, who's an adult and who has his studio, and he's a young man. And she's living with him, and she would live with him until she died, you know. So you have this crazy situation of Nanny living here with him having, you know, his boyfriend in the next room and doing his painting. And you have this strange situation of Nanny next door being a witness of his life.
Can we go back to the paintings though? Because we have Nanny's voice, but we also have Francis's voice. Tell me why you wanted his voice and how you put it in the book.
I didn't want to have a realistic Francis Bacon's voice because he's done a lot of interviews. And so we know the way he was talking. And so I didn't want to have a kind of Bacon-like voice, which would sound weird. And so I had this idea that we could have an inside voice, the way he was talking to himself while he was painting. So this is a voice we don't know. This is a voice which doesn't pay attention to who's listening because no one is, because that's inside his mind. And because I found that in interview, he's very much posing, you know, he's very much playing with the interviewer. He never says really something about, we never know what's happening in the room while he's painting. He's always, yeah, kind of playing with the interviewer. It's a cat with a mouse scene, which, you know. So I was thinking, what is he telling to himself? And so it would be a way to be inside the creative process, but without explaining it, just showing a scene of what you say to yourself while you're in front of the painting, while you're painting. So this is a voice when he say you to himself, as we say to yourself, come on, do that, you know. So that's this voice, which is also a mix of the voice we all have in our head when we're having an inside conversation. You know, it's a bit like the way your parents talk to you, the way Nanny is talking to him, the way his super ego. It's super ego, and also full of he's always disappointed by what he's doing. It's very difficult to make real the vision he has in his mind and the painting he has in his mind, and he's always upset with the work and all that. So we have access to this Francis voice saying you to himself. You read this? Yeah. This is a short piece. So we have one chapter in Nanny, one chapter, which is not a chapter, which is more a very small piece, which is a painting, and that's Francis' voice. It always has the name of a painting, so someone can look up online and see the painting if they are interested. Okay. Francis, homme à genoux dans l'herbe.
Francis, man kneeling in grass.
Mélange de peinture dans l'assiette, couche épaisse de fauve, d'ocre dans la paille tranchante, de vert jauni pour les herbes encore vivantes, du blanc enduit de poussière pour la peau asphyxiée, la chair étouffée du soumis, bleuie entre les cuisses et sous les flancs.
Mixture of paint on the plate. Thick layers of foam. Ochre for the sharp straw. Yellowy green for the still living grass. White, coated with dust for the asphyxiated skin. The suffocated flesh of the submissive subject. Bluish between the thighs and under the flanks.
Toile fondue en deux espaces, deux dimensions. Le garçon à genoux, petite lope au premier plan, et au fond, debout, la silhouette menaçante.
The canvas is split into two spaces, 2 dimensions, with the boy on his knees, a little slag, in the foreground, and the menacing figure standing in the background.
Le garçon nu, livré, redevenu animal, quadrupède, les bras enfoncés dans la terre, enraciné.
The naked boy has surrendered, has become an animal again, a quadruped, rooted, his arms sunk into the earth.
Les jambes écartées forment un triangle avec le sol, dos et hanches horizontaux, arrière-plan galbé. La position du corps, le dos légèrement arrondi, muscles tendus, la colonne de vertèbres qui perce sous la peau, craque.
His legs, spread apart, form a triangle with the ground. His back and hips are horizontal, his hindquarters curved. The position of the body, with the back slightly rounded, the muscles taut, the column of vertebrae piercing beneath the skin. Crack.
La tête entre les jambes, la chevelure qui dépasse, une touffe de poils flous, balayée d'un coup de brosse, crac.
The head between the legs, the hair sticking out, a blurred tuft, swept away with the brush stroke, crack.
Les herbes hautes montent du sol vers la chair, ligne verticale et ligne oblique pour la transpercer, pour empaler le garçon nu qui cède. Au-dessus de lui s'abat l'ombre violette, l'ombre violente brouillée de noir, crac.
The tall grass rises from the ground towards the flesh, vertical lines and oblique lines, to pierce it, to impale the naked boy who yields. Above him the purple shadow falls, a violent shadow blurred with black, crack.
Image figée entre deux coups, le fouet est absent de l'image, hors champ ou invisible, peut-être caché dans l'herbe.
An image frozen between two blows. The whip is absent from the image, out of focus or invisible, perhaps hidden in the grass.
Tu forces les traits. Le noir qui cercle la peau fait ressortir la viande. Une chose se nourrit d'une autre. Le prédateur prend sa ration, mais les corps ne se touchent pas. Pas de contact sans l'intermédiaire du fouet, du cuir qui forme une autre peau, qui secrètement les relie dans l'herbe.
You force the lines, the black that encircles the skin highlighting the meat. One thing feeds on another. The predator has his fill, but the bodies don't touch. No contact without the whip as a go-between, the leather that forms another skin that secretly links them in the grass.
L'homme debout est tout entier dans sa main, dans la force qui anime l'outil. Le ciel obscur descend sur lui, recouvre son visage, coup de brosse, crac.
The standing man is entirely in his hand, in the force that drives the tool. Dark sky descends on him, covering his face. A brush stroke, crack.
Le rend anonyme. S'il était visible, on verrait son sourire inquiétant, ses dents. Tu es incapable de peindre un sourire. Tu caresses de ton pinceau le corps prêt à recevoir la blessure, l'accident que tu as toi-même provoqué.
It makes him anonymous. If he were visible, his worrying smile would be seen, his teeth. You're unable to paint a smile. You caress the body, ready to receive the wound with your brush, the accident that you yourself have caused.
So I find these,
They're not descriptions of the paintings, they're interactions with the paintings. I find them absolutely compelling. I think they're like prose poems, each one of them. What did you do? Did you go and stand in front of the paintings? Did you kind of hypnotize yourself while you were looking at them? How did you get that voice?
I looked at the paintings. I had all the books and all the paintings, and I just got into the paintings so much and for so long that I was troubled myself, by the paintings, and I just had a kind of, when you see all the objects in the studio and you looked up and, there's this beautiful book with all the objects and the details and the newspaper, and you got into his word in a very, it's like an investigation in these objects and images that got to him, and at some point I just had this strong feeling of, and I just wanted to, the process of painting is of course very different to the process of writing, but it's a creative process. So I could have an idea of the way what he wanted to do, what he couldn't do, and and so I just had this crazy idea of what would it be in a writing to do what Beckens does in a painting? What would it be in a writing, the equivalent, if it does make sense, the equivalent with words to the painting? So that's the way I worked.
Yeah, it's the materiality of the painting in the same way as when you're inventing the voice, you're inventing all of the registers and the sounds and the materiality of the voice.
And you have the same mix of shock, violence, but also beauty of the colors and materiality, because it's also
It's very tactile.
It's very tactile, yeah. So, and the way he deals with the dust he has in the studio that he put in everything that goes into the painting, you know, all the material. So the painting is also a kind of sculpture in a very
collage
yeah.
way.
So I wanted to deal with that and to have the equivalent in words. What could I do that would do the same effect as a painting, you know? So that's the way I was trying to convert in a very strange way, you know, the painting to the words. So my idea was not to describe or to analyze, was to get into this process and this emotion of the painting as if I was doing the same. And if I was, okay, you want to have this reaction of someone who's watching the painting, okay, I want the same reaction but with words. What would it do? So that was the idea.
Can we finish with my favorite part of the book? My favorite part of the book is the prologue. And the prologue is a superb piece of writing. I think this is another thread which links the three books. They're all books about people who grow old, and it's about old age. And you have a quotation from Bacon at the very beginning. It says, "What remains in the end, a pile of bones and a few teeth." And it's this meditation on growing old, in a sense.
This is an extract from an interview. He says that, you know, what's that at the end? And it's pretty drunk during the interview, but I really love this sentence. And the prologue is about a painting who's the nanny of the cuirassé Potemkin. That's
The battleship, the Potemkin battleship.
Battleship
Potemkin.
you know. And this painting, who's about, you know, this nanny of the movie that we all know, you know, with the glasses, and you know, it got into her eyes, broken, and we all know the buggy, you know, falling down in the stairs, and this scary part of when we have this nanny screaming, you know, and the scream and the glasses and the broken glasses. And in the painting, it's the nanny is naked and she's in a swing. And he said, who knows if it's true or not, you know, Bacon's talking, so who knows, but he said that at some point he has been inspired by the nanny, by his own nanny. So this is the very beginning of the book, the prologue. This painting, which would be the unique and the only kind of painting of the nanny I'm talking about, you know, Jessie Lightfoot. She's there, the painting is still there, she's dead, but as in the book, after she died, she's still there in his mind. This painting is there for eternity. So this painting is telling its own story about, you know, the true story of Francis Bacon, of the fake true story of Francis Bacon. So this is the painting, which is the tribute to the nanny, maybe the only one he really did publicly, but in a very discreet way. Peut-être, maybe you should read it in English, all in English, because it's one piece.
Okay, so just the English, you'll have to buy the book for the French, or listen to the audio tape. Prologue. Portrait of Jessie Lightfoot, Nanny. When it soliloquizes, Jessie Lightfoot's mouth scarcely opens, a tight trap on a mouse's snout. Not really a mouth, more of a line, a slit on a money box, a wave of flesh drawn inwards. Difficult to determine what will go in and what may come out. Difficult to distinguish between an ordinary mouth and a vampire's ghoulish maw, or an oracle's orifice. The only thing needed is an opening, with jaws ajar for it to become something else entirely. For a hilly landscape in shades of pink to appear in a sky of serrated ivory. It all depends on the chosen moment. A mere yawn in the middle of a feast, and you are plunged into the abyss, into the dark den of massacres, into the kingdom of the carrion eaters, where the juices from the bites are sprayed, where bones and cartilage creak. In the case of extreme pain or imminent danger, the view of the mouth is not the same, of course. It opens as widely as possible, with lips ready to split and sharpened teeth bared, just in case. As for the black depths of the orifice, it shakes to the vibrations of the shriek that escapes from it, like ether into the skies, thundering alongside them. The mouth is so changeable, so chatty. It's the maw of all humanity, all for one, contained within it, a mystery. What can Jessie Lightfoot say in the present day, now that she's frozen on canvas, immortalized? Her teeth one day may have the better over the meat that envelops them. The mouth may be eaten by itself, like the rind exposed, forever opened. Maxillary on show, incisors on offer. Unless the reverse happens and the skin becomes leathery when it comes into contact with the hard teeth, a leather mouth on a hippopotamus, a rustic cow's rump. Another possibility is that the damp mandible might gather speed and end up spitting out miles of chops as thick as a tongue. No, not this mouth, not Jessie Lightfoot's mouth. The painter's Nanny, his mother, is forever suspended over the swing of his childhood, bathed in an ocean of green, a naked goddess with an open mouth. Every night, it tells anyone willing to listen what teems beneath the weft of this canvas, what the granular painting has revealed and covered up. The winds of memory blow over the portrait of the Nanny whom the painter has made eternal. They still blow over the injured child lying on the straw to warm himself up. The child whose father left him bloodied, who braved hatred before meeting Nanny, who spent his whole life dodging the whip.
Thank you. Thank you.